Hey guys, welcome to book review number 61. What is this? The Statues That Walked. Unraveling the Mysteries of Easter Island by Terry Hunt and Carl Lipo. Okay, so this is more a little bit of an academic book, though a entertaining read that uncovers the mysteries of Easter Island. The primary mystery being how Easter Island, a tiny island in the middle of the Pacific, could produce massive, in its ancient history, this is before white people discovered it, these are ancient Polynesians that built this, how a tiny, tiny island in a tiny society could have multi-ton stone monolith statues dragged all the way from a quarry in the center part of the island to ring around the island. I mean, these are like way more than cars. And it also talks, that's kind of the big draw mystery of Easter Island, in that if you travel there very immediately, these statues become obvious. The other thing that's wondered is how a society could maintain itself on an island that's so barren. Something about Easter Island is that it is very rocky, very few streams and running water. I think there are a few streams, but it's not lush. And also almost no trees. Now, kind of what's covered in the book is how the society collapsed, because when Europeans got here, at least later Europeans, it's a little hint, the societies were no longer building these stone statues. They had largely just been abandoned in their tracks. Obviously they still existed because they're made of stone, and the people were living on a very meager subsistence agricultural life. And so they talk about first how the island became so deforested, and a lot of people think that when the Polynesians arrived here, which is estimated to be about in the year, as I take my coat off, about in the year 1100 or later, 11 to 1200, I think, that the island was forested at one time, and there's actually archaeological or biological evidence of this in the strata of soil that they can estimate existed before humans got there, that there are large amounts of tree matter, specifically a palm that is popular in, or does well in South America. Jeez, how come I couldn't get that? Does well in South America, but it's thought that humans cut down all these trees in an attempt to build these statues when they arrived. Now, actually, what the people in this book prove, Terry and Carl, I believe, is that humans did not cut these trees down, but actually what happened is they carried rats with them, and the rats actually ate the tree material. And the way they figured this out is very little of the tree material is burnt carbon, which is how you would think the trees would be cut down. They would be cut down to use for fuel. That's primarily some building, but that's primarily how trees would be used at that time period. But a lot of the dead trees exist on a strata before sort of the large human settlement happened. And so what's thought of is that the very first wave of humans that arrived on Easter Island actually had rats with them. The rats killed off all the trees, and then the humans started reproducing, as you will, much slower than the rats did, because the rats obviously just reproducing, and then used the remaining trees for fuel, but certainly did not cut down the vast majority of forest as thought of in the book. So the question is, if the people didn't, or if the Polynesians didn't use these trees to move these statues, which are, here you get a good picture of it right on the front cover. And you can see you got these huge monolithic statues that are all over the island. I mean, they're just laying everywhere, but particularly around the coastline. How do they get these to move? And what the archaeological people, researchers actually found out is that they are specifically designed so that there can be a walking method. And this is actually mentioned in ancient myths of the people of Polynesia. Now, obviously, no rational scientist is going to say, well, these giant stone monoliths just got up and walked. But what they actually did is they referred to it as the refrigerator method, whereas if you have a large refrigerator, you go like this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and kind of tilting it on its two axes as you go along, like tilting it on the two axes. And the way they did this is they put rope kind of in the front of the face of the statue, tilted it forward about 15 degrees, and then kind of walked it, like with a whole bunch of people on this side and a whole bunch of people on this side, and kind of walked it on a very, they would plan this out ahead of time on a very mild gradient from the quarries down to the coastlines. And they actually even designed these statues with the center of gravity being such that these walkings could take place, as such. And that's kind of the mystery of the book, the crux of the book. What else? It's really not super long. It's only about 180 pages. Well, I guess the real question then is, how did the society collapse? Or first of all, I guess I should say there's really two questions. Why did they build these statues to begin with? Right? And secondly, why did it collapse? Well, the first question, why they built these statues, has to do with the agriculture of the island. Now, as I said, Easter Island, or maybe I didn't say this, Easter Island is a pretty barren island. It's very rock strewn. As I mentioned, there are no trees because they all died because of the rats. It's just not very lush. So there's limited agriculture. Now, one of the biggest problems with humans is when they come into an area and reproduce, over-reproduce, in which case it causes war over a limited number of resources, and obviously on an island like Easter Island, the resources are limited. So why were these statues built? Well, actually, very crudely put, and with much more sort of religious and cultural significance, these statues were something for people to do instead of making babies. So when they weren't in the fields with the agriculture, I guess I should also say, in a society where the agriculture is very stable over the course of time, you can reach a maximum carrying capacity without need for people to cut back on number of babies made, because they'll reach a certain equilibrium with how much food is in society. But on a place that's unproductive like Easter Island, you can have bumper crop seasons that are very high, but you can also have very low yield seasons. And because of this, you need to make it so that during the bumper crop years, your population doesn't have children into infinity, in which case when the yield drops, they'll fight each other and create conflict in the society. So what's actually thought is that during these bumper crop years, during the more successful times, the leaders would encourage people to build statues in honor of their family or whatever, or their ancestors, in lieu of having more children. And so that's kind of very crudely put the reason why these statues were built to begin with. Now, obviously, if you ask any individual person, they would certainly never say that, and even I don't think the chiefs were that cynical. There was obviously huge religious significance. There were almost sort of like pews set in front of these statues so people could pray to them, out in front of the ocean, pray to their ancestors and all this stuff. But from a purely scientific point of view or archaeological point of view, that's the main reason why the statues were built, was because the agriculture of the island was very up and down. I should also mention, as an aside, it was also very ingenious, because the way that they did sort of maintain this sort of bumper crop down yield time, this is a little aside from the statues themselves, is they would take small pumice rocks and plant them in the soil. Now, you'd think that that would be unproductive, because obviously a very rocky soil is not good for raising crops. But what it really does is, if you have a very fertile soil, but a fertile soil that is not going to maintain for a long period of time, primarily because all your trees have died off. So it's sort of like a short-term gain of having these trees there and then not there. So you have a very thin layer of very productive soil, but not a real deep layer like in Kansas or something like that. You can have a lot of food real fast, but then when the soil's used up, it's gone. So what you do is you put rocks in there. It makes it a little more even in terms of the soil, but also the way that the plants grow, it kind of protects the plants to a degree. Now, I didn't understand exactly all the science in this, but kind of having a rocky soil will not be the most productive, but will be the sort of the long-term strategy way to help your society out. This is very different than the collapse in the ecological collapse that's often proposed in the Society of Easter Island. The Easter Islanders were actually great environmentalists and very smart about the way that they maintained their society. They didn't just, put a gun to their head ecologically and destroy their society like a lot of people think. Okay, so the final thing is, well, why did this kind of die out? Well, there's really two reasons. One, and they both have, unfortunately, to do with the Europeans, white people. So around the 16 to 1700s, I believe, 1600s was when they first came, late 1600s, ships from Europe started coming in. Now, if you know anything about Europeans, is that they spread disease, and often the disease spreads just by one or two contacts, and then contact from native to native spreads ahead of actual settlement of Europeans. So what was thought is that these people in Easter Island were still building the statues when the first ships built, and the society was actually quite, if not successful, at least stable. But with the introduction of smallpox, a lot of venereal diseases, which these people obviously didn't have treatment for, and there was no immunity built up over the course of time like there was with Europeans who, survival of the fittest, have had immunities built up, actually died off because of these diseases. And I guess the other thing that happened besides the more grotesque disease-ridden thing was a cultural diversion. Now, if you believe that you're not primarily making these statues, at least mentally from the people's point of view, to prevent you from having children, you're doing it for religious purposes. Now, if you come in and you see this, and you come in on these small boats and you have this very traditional society, and you suddenly see these people whose skin color you've never seen before drive on these massive boats, and they have hats and they have gold and they have all this stuff, suddenly your old gods are looking pretty paltry. It's just a giant piece of stone, not what's going on with these boats. So it's actually thought that the religious frame of reference changed from these ancestral statues almost to, if not like purely religious, at least sort of like a deity type of thing, to the Europeans that actually would occasionally show up on the island. And therefore all these statues were left in the quarries, not worked on, plus you had like 3/4 of the population dying off, and they were just abandoned, which is why it's not like a slow decline of the society where they got the last of the statues into place. There are statues that are half done or in the process of being moved and scattered all over the island. So that's kind of how it ends. Luckily, they did mention in the book, though this isn't the primary focus of the book, is that the indigenous rights movement in Easter Island and the self-governing movement in Easter Island, which is a part of Chile now, is actually taking root. And there's just a lot more sort of social awareness, both among the indigenous community as well as white people coming in. The effects that white people and, well, I shouldn't just say white people, but humans in general have upon the ecology and the cultural ecology or cultural archaeology of the society in visiting there. So there's just a lot of consciousness about what is going on. So anyway, yeah, it's a really good book. I would, if you like kind of mysteries, but historical mysteries, but cultural historical mysteries, but archaeological cultural historical mysteries, I don't know. Check out this book, Unraveling the Mysteries of Easter Island, The Statues That Walked, by Terry Hunt and Carl Lipo. All right, you guys, check out some more of my reviews. See you later.